Good afternoon everyone and welcome to this PointBeyond executive briefing on Power BI. Before we start, I would just like to mention that this is being recorded. We will send a link to the recording out to everybody afterwards. Also, you will see a question panel on the right hand side. Please do feel free to post any questions that you may have and I will do my best to answer those at the end. So I want to briefly introduce myself. My name is Ian Woodgate. I'm the Managing Director at PointBeyond. I've been working in IT for around about 20 years now, and I've been working with SharePoint and associated products for over a decade. My background is in financial services, but these days I work extensively with a broad range of customers from different industries, and particularly tend to get involved at helping people to define their IT strategy and how to best make use of products such as Power BI. The agenda for today is really as follows. I'm going to briefly explain what Power BI from Microsoft actually is, because it is a bit of a generic marketing term encompassing a suite of products, as we shall see. We'll talk about how it can be used. Then got a demo where I'll be looking at some of the functionality. We'll be discussing some of the pros and cons of using Power BI within your organization, then looking at pricing, and then we'll wrap up with a question and answer session. So I thought it would be useful to start with the definition of Power BI from Microsoft. And they say it's a self-service business intelligence solution using Microsoft Excel and Office 365. So that's all well and good, but I thought, what actually do we mean by self-service business intelligence? And I found this great description here from Gartner, which is that it's about end users designing and deploying their own reports and analyses within an approved and supported architecture and tools portfolio. And I kind of like that description actually, because it's talking about end users. It's about end users doing this stuff for themselves, reducing the dependence and the involvement of the IT team. But it's also about doing it in an approved and supported way that's managed and overseen by IT. So it's not about people kind of cowboy style opening access or Excel straight into production line of business databases and doing what they want in an uncontrolled way. It's about putting some appropriate controls and architecture in place around getting the data that we need. Okay, so in the next slide, what I want to do is take a look at kind of how Power BI works. And I've attempted to summarize the main points of Power BI in this single slide. So what I'll do now is bring up a pointer and just walk through the main aspects of it. So we're starting off with some data sources. These could be on-premise databases, such as SQL Server or Oracle or DB2, whatever they may be. But these may also be publicly available or private web services that we're accessing via the internet. Doesn't matter. We've got some data sources. What we're doing is we're loading that data into Excel, but we're doing it using some new tooling, including an in-memory database that runs within Excel, which is highly scalable. And I think this is a key point to take away. The database in Excel manages hundreds of millions of rows without any problem at all. It's a highly scalable in-memory database that's capable of handling very large numbers of rows of data. What we do in Excel is we manipulate that data, we define relationships, we define KPIs, and then finally we can take that data and we can create visualizations of it, charts, graphs, etc., etc. When we've done that, we can publish that Excel file up into a Power BI site, which is a SharePoint 2013 site in Office 365 with the Power BI app enabled. So that's all well and good. We've got our Excel spreadsheet with our data in Office 365. What we can also optionally configure is something called the Data Management Gateway, and this is a nice piece of software that sits on a server on-premise and is actually capable of connecting to our on-premise data sources and publishing the data up to Office 365, but in a highly secure way that doesn't require you to make incoming holes in your firewall to allow connectivity in. So it publishes the data very securely up to Office 365. So we've got our Excel spreadsheet with this nice visualization sitting up here in Office 365. We can then allow users to come in and view that data. And they can do that both through a browser, and there's also a mobile app currently available for Windows 8, but I believe there's an app planned for iOS as well. So the users can come in and they can view and interact with the data in a very nice and powerful way. What I'd like to do now is drill down into this in a little bit more detail and look at the components that actually make it up. One of the things that I've already mentioned is that Power BI is really a kind of marketing brand. It's actually made up of several different components, and I think those components break very nicely into two halves. We've got the half using Excel, and we've got the half using Power BI functionality within Office 365. And these to some extent are independent in that you can, if you want to, you can make use of a lot of the self-service Power BI features in Excel without having to use Power BI for Office 365. So you can't do everything, but you can still do a lot, even if you should decide that you don't decide to go the full route and have the Power BI for Office 365 capability. I should point out though that Power BI for Office 365 is a cloud-only offering at the moment. There is no firm plans to deploy Power BI for on-premise, and I think it's quite possible that it will stay that way and continue to be a cloud-based offering. Okay, so let's drill down into these in a little bit more detail now, starting off with the Excel side of things. So when it comes to Excel, there are really four features within Excel, if you like, that enhance the capabilities of Excel. Starting at the top here, we've got the ability to import data from a variety of sources very quickly and very easily using a tool called Power Query. What I'll just do now is flick quickly to Excel and I'll show you how that works. So you can see here a blank Excel spreadsheet. You'll notice here at the top I've got a tab here that says Power Query. So go ahead and click on that, and you'll see in here I've got options to get external data, and I've got a large number of sources that I can get external data from. We can get it from web pages. This is quite nice. It allows you to extract data from a table on a web page. We can get it from files of various formats. We can connect to a broad range of databases, including things like, obviously like SQL Server, but also Oracle, IBM DB2, MySQL, Sybase, etc., etc. We also supports a large range of other sources, including things like SharePoint lists, OData feeds, even things like Active Directory, Microsoft Exchange, even should you choose to do so, take things from Facebook. Notice also here the support from SAP Business Objects as well. So a large range of options to import our data very quickly and very easily into Excel. And it's also worth mentioning that Power Query includes the ability to apply transformations to our data as well as we import it. Okay, then once we've loaded our data into Excel, it's worth mentioning that that data is actually loaded into an in-memory database which is provided by some functionality called Power Pivot. This is a massively scalable in-memory database. I've said already, hundreds of millions of rows are supported without a problem. In Power Pivot, we can also do things like define the relationships between the different entities that we've imported. We can also do things like define KPIs. And lastly, when we've done that analysis work and defined those relationships, we can visualize our data. And the tools that we use to do that are Power View and Power Map. So Power View allows us to create tables and charts, and pie charts and diagrams and graphs and that kind of thing. Power Map is for mapping geographic data, as you can see in the screenshot on the right-hand side of this diagram. And in a minute, when we come to the demo, I shall be demonstrating Power View. That's the Excel side of things. Let's go ahead now and have a look at the Power BI side of things. So there are several components we get if we take a Power BI for Office 365 subscription. The first thing is we get the ability to create and use BI sites. So these are SharePoint sites that have a Power BI feature enabled. This creates a very nice view of the dashboards, the visualizations that we've created, and allows us to interact with them and view them through our browser without needing to use Excel. The next thing we get is the ability to define and share queries. So let's say, for example, I've written a query that shows the top 10 customers by revenue across my organization. I can choose to share that query across my organization, so other people who are using Excel can go in and find my query, make use of the data within their own reports, and everyone's going to be looking at a consistent, up-to-date set of data and using the same query. As I've already mentioned earlier, we've got the data refresh. This is with this very nice piece of software called the Data Management Gateway. It's a service that runs on one or more on-premise servers, hooks into your on-premise database and securely publishes that data up to Power BI for Office 365 without you needing to make any incoming holes in your firewall. Similar in some ways to the ability to share queries, we've got the ability to share data. So this is more of an administrative role where an administrator can define authoritative data sources within an organization for other people, other business users to consume within Excel. So you might have a list of students or a list of products or a list of customers or whatever it may be. Wouldn't it be great if everyone in your organization was looking at the same up-to-date list of that information and that it was coming from your line of business systems? Well, Power BI data search, Power BI data sharing allows you to do that, so people can come in, they can find the data sources that they need and import them very quickly into Excel. When we come to the demo again in a second, I shall show you that. In fact, I'll go ahead and I'll show you that right now. So I'm back into my Excel blank spreadsheet here. What I can do is I can come here and do an online search. Just click that tab, and you can see we get this little panel on the right hand side. So let's say I'm interested in my customers, so I can search for customers. You'll see it's gone out, it's searched some public sources, but it's also searched within my organization, and I've set one up earlier which is here, my list of customers. And I can go in here and I can see the data, see what columns I've got, and if that's the data I want, I can simply press load. And we're now pulling that data from Power BI for Office 365 into my Excel spreadsheet, and there you go. So I'm now looking at an up-to-date list of the customers within Excel. Okay. The next area to look at with Power BI for Office 365 is mobile access. So as I've already mentioned, we have mobile apps. At the moment, this is one that's available for Windows 8, but there's one for iOS also planned. And these just provide a slightly richer, more touch-friendly experience for users than using a browser. The functionality is broadly similar. We'll have a quick look at the mobile access in a minute. One of the things you can't currently do with the mobile apps, which you can do with the browser, is the natural language questions, which I'll talk about now. This is a really nice piece of functionality with Power BI for Office 365. What it allows you to do is it allows you to just ask questions of your data in natural language, and it will interpret what you've asked and display the results in what it sees as the most appropriate way. And again, I shall demo this in a second. Let's just have a quick recap now of what we've looked at and how Power BI can be used. So there, as we've mentioned before, there are really two halves. We've got the Excel half, where we can do things like import and transform very large amounts of data into Excel. We can model the relationships and create KPIs again in Excel for our data. And when we've done that, we can create interactive charts, dashboards and maps using Power View and Power Map. And you can use most of that functionality, as I've said, without having the Power BI for Office 365 subscription. If you choose to go the full route and have the Power BI for Office 365 as well, we get some extra functionality. We get the ability to find both data sources and queries and share them in a controlled way across our organization so that everyone's using the same queries and working with the same data sets. We get the ability to publish our dashboards to Power BI sites so that users can consume them using browsers or using mobile applications. And lastly, we get the ability to ask natural language queries of our data and have Power BI intelligently assess what it is we're asking and to provide the most appropriate results to us. Okay, I'm going to switch over now and demonstrate some of this functionality that we've been talking about. I'm going to start with Excel, and I'm going to start with the dashboard that I've created earlier. And this is the dashboard for a fictitious consulting company that has customers, does project work for customers, has consultants who are doing billable work for those customers on those projects. And this dashboard shows the relationship between those different entities. So you can see here on this first tab, we've got some information about the different projects here. I've got a graph here showing days by customer name and activity. We've got revenue by consultant. I've got consultant name down here. And this is nice and interactive. We can click on a particular consultant, say Ethan Davies here. And you'll notice that all the charts and tables update. We can now see the projects that Ethan's been involved in. We can see his average rate here. We can see his involvement reflected on the graph over here. But we can slice things in different ways as well. If we want to, we can go and choose a particular segment of our pie chart. We can choose a particular customer over here if we want, and see how the charts respond. We can do things like click on different segments here. Again, you can see the responses in the different tables. We can slice and dice the data that way, in this kind of way. Just say we just want to see consulting billable work. And I've got a second tab here as well, where I've got some different information with regards to trends, and I've got a KPI status as well. Let's say I wanted to add another chart. I'll just show you quickly how easy that is to do. Let's just say I wanted to start showing revenue by customer. It's simply a matter of coming to the right hand side here, choosing the fields that we want. So I want customer name, and I've said I wanted revenue. Revenue, interestingly enough, is a calculated column that we're calculating within the in-memory database in Excel. And so there's the data that we want. Let's just resize that, and it's done it as a table. Perhaps we don't want a table. Perhaps what we actually want is a chart. So let's just switch that over to be a column chart. And then it's as simple as that. We've got our data source available there. So very quick, very easy to use to create the views that we want. That's all well and good, but now what I've also done is I've taken that dashboard and I've published it up to a Power BI site. So let's flick over now to browser and I'll show you the Power BI site. So this is my site in kind of standard SharePoint view. This is my SharePoint site that's got Power BI enabled. You see I've got a link on the right hand side here, on the left hand side here to Power BI. I can go ahead and click on that. And our Power BI site loads. You can see that we've got the dashboard here. I've actually made it a featured report, so it's appearing slightly larger at the top up here. We can go ahead, we can click on that. We get to see our visualizations again. Now this is using Silverlight, which is limiting when it comes to iOS devices at the moment, although Microsoft are actively working on HTML5 visualizations. So some of the visualizations are currently supported with HTML5 and some of them aren't. So if you are working to deliver to iOS, you need to be a bit careful as to what visualizations you use currently. But as I say, it's being actively worked on, so it's always improving. And the functionality here in the browser is the same really as we saw in Excel. We can click on particular components and see how the graphs and the other tables respond and interact. Click on particular people, particular activities, and so forth, and see the interaction. We've got our second tab, as before, showing the data there. We can even do things that you can do more sophisticated things, start filtering. Perhaps you're only interested in some particular customers. So you come in here and perhaps just choose the 3 customers that you're interested in. And you can see the data for them. So again, very kind of easy to work with, very interactive. Okay, one other thing I wanted to show here while we're still on the browser-based view is that the data is being refreshed through the data management gateway. So you'll notice here, if I come here, I can come and see my data refresh here. We can see on the history here, we can see that data is successfully refreshed just a little while before I started doing this webinar. And that you can schedule that refresh as you wish. One other thing to show, before we show the Q&A, I'd just like quickly to show you the app. So let me just start that up now. So this is the Power BI app for Office 365. Sorry, for Windows 8, beg your pardon. Just bring that across, it's just loading. Here we go. So immersive Windows 8 experience, but again, similar kind of functionality that we saw both with the browser and with Excel. You can go back to home page. You can see it's separated out my two tabs here. Again, you can click and see that dashboard if you wish. And it's a nice kind of touch-friendly experience for users. Very intuitive to work with and kind of nice for execs or whoever to be walking around with a tablet device, having all this data at their fingertips and being able to interact with it. It's clearly the idea behind these kind of apps. Lastly, let's go back to our site and look at the Power BI question and answers. I think this is really rather nice functionality. So we can go to our site, we can click at this link on the right hand side. It says ask with Power BI questions and answers. Go ahead and do that. And you can see we've just got a text box. What I can do is I can start asking questions. So maybe I'm interested in the number of projects that we've done, so I can just ask number. And then we get an answer there, 301. But maybe I'm interested in the number of projects by customer name. Notice how as I type, it's making suggestions. There we go, number of projects by customer names. It's chosen to display that data as a chart. Maybe I didn't want a chart, maybe I wanted to see that as a table. I can change it in that way if I wish. So you can quickly get the information that you want. Let's try a few different queries to show you the kind of thing that I mean. Maybe I'm interested in seeing revenue by consultants, so let's ask that. There we go, there's our revenue by consultant. Maybe I'm interested in that revenue by month. See, that's showing there. Maybe I'm interested in revenue by month, but also and activity. You can see again it's making suggestions, but there we go. And now it's split the revenue out, showing me the different activities and my revenue by those different activities. But we can also do some really cool things as well. We can say maybe I'm interested in seeing my revenue by county. It's clever enough to realize that that's geographic information, so it goes off to Bing Maps and does us this kind of graphical display on a map. And none of this is pre-prepared. This is all Power BI in real time, working out what query I'm asking and determining the best way to visualize it. And you can slice that down further as well if you want to see that and by activity. There you go. So we can start slicing and dicing the data like that. So some really nice, really rich functionality within Power BI. That concludes the demo. We're just going to flick back to the slides and talk a little bit about the pros and cons as I see them of using Power BI. So let's look at some of the pros. Certainly my experience of using Power BI is it's really quite quick to put these kind of visualizations together. It's relatively simple to do. You're working with familiar tools like Excel and SharePoint. You're not having to learn a whole new way of working. It's also highly scalable. The in-memory database really does work well with hundreds of millions of rows, and it's a relatively low-cost solution compared to having perhaps implementing some enterprise BI type solution. Another big advantage, of course, is there's no hardware or infrastructure needed. You're not having to commission kit to run anything like data warehouses or build cubes or anything like that. It's all just using Excel and the Office 365 capability. So there's no hardware to manage and maintain and indeed to purchase. Some of the cons then, as I see them, is that I think the visualizations are more limited than you may get with a more sophisticated specialist BI tool. I'm sure that's something Microsoft are very aware of, and I'm sure they will be working on that and improving those visualizations as time goes on. As I've already mentioned as well, some of the visualizations do need Silverlight. Microsoft is working on HTML5 equivalents for those visualizations, and the number of HTML5 equivalents is increasing all the time. The other thing to bear in mind is that the iOS app is not out yet. However, you can use the browser-based view if you wish to do so, as long as you're not using visualizations that are dependent on Silverlight, of course. So there are some restrictions around using iOS at the moment. Okay, the last thing to take a look at quickly is the pricing. There really are two options here, and it depends on whether or not you have an existing Office 365 plan. If you do, and it's an E3 or an E4 plan, then you're looking at around about £12.50 per user per month. If you don't, and if you don't have an E3 or an E4, and you're just looking at taking Power BI for Office 365 without having any of the additional functionality that's available within Office 365, then you're looking at a charge of £24.90 per user per month. So if you are leveraging Office 365, it's obviously quite a lot cheaper. That really concludes the demo. I'd like to thank everyone for listening today. I'd also say as well that if you like what you've seen today and you think it's of interest to yourself, I would encourage you to come and talk to us about an evaluation, because it's very easy for us to quite quickly put something together that will show you what is achievable with this technology and help you decide whether or not it is right for you. So I see now there are some questions. I'm going to go ahead and answer those now, but once again, thank you for your time and I hope you found this session useful. Right, so the first question is, what version of Excel do I need? So that's a very good question actually. To use everything, you do really need Excel 2013, and if the amount of data that you have is large, then you really need to use Excel 2013 64-bit so that you can have sufficient memory in your system to be able to contain the in-memory database that I was talking about. Some of the functionality that we've demonstrated to talk about today is available in Excel 2010. In particular, you can have Power Query for Excel 2010. That's the tooling that allows you to import data, is available in Excel 2010 as an add-on, and also Power Pivot, the in-memory database. That does exist within Excel 2010 or can be added to Excel 2010. But the Power View and the Power Map functionality that we talked about is Excel 2013 only. So if you're using this, I would advise really Excel 2013. Do bear in mind though that it only needs to be the people who are creating and publishing the dashboards to an Office 365 site that need to have Excel 2013. Your consumers can be consuming the data either in the Windows 8 app or just using their browsers. You have one more question, which is, can it connect to Oracle? Yes, it can actually. So you probably don't know if you recall when we looked at the connections within Power Query. It supports a wide range of databases, one of which is Oracle. Okay, that concludes. I see there are no more questions. So once again, thank you everyone for listening, and we hope you found the session useful and look forward to welcoming you on the next session.